Asim, thank you so much for joining me in this show. We are one big advantage of COVID, I guess.
Anyone who does the good work, they would like to have appreciated. Data doesn't lie. You don't need SOC team from day one. Automation is the key. Those things look good on videos, but they don't actually work. This question is something that I've came a lot of times. They want to get started in cybersecurity because seeing these bug bounty screenshots and money and all. I started with CTFs. The first thing is you need to understand this jargon of terms.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into our Scale to Zero show. I'm Purushottam, co founder and CTO of CloudNX. Scale to Zero is a forum where we collect questions from curious security professionals and invite security experts to learn about their journey and also to get these questions answered. Our goal is to build a community where we can all learn about security together and leave no security questions unanswered. So with that, let's get started. For today's episode, we have Aseem Shrey with us. So Aseem works at Rippling as a security engineer. Prior to that, he was a senior security engineer at Gojek. He also hosts a video podcast called Hacking Simplified, where he covers topics around hacking and cybersecurity in general. Asim, thank you so much for joining me in this show. We are super excited to have you here.
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you, CloudNix, for inviting me. It's a great opportunity. Yeah.
Absolutely, we love that you are here. So let's get started into the questions, right? So I want to start with your podcast. You host a video podcast on hacking and cybersecurity in general called Hacking Simplified, right? So I have a couple of questions here. Like, what made you decide to start a video podcast of your own? How did you start your journey? Any pearls of wisdom for anyone who wants to start or would want to start their own podcast around security in future?
Oh, that's a good one. So I started around 2 years back when COVID started. It was May 2020, I think. 9th May was the first day I uploaded a video. So it had been something like I love to teach people about things and all. I used to do this in my college. I used to have live seminar, webinar kind of thing. And I used to teach there. And because this was after college, so I graduated from college in 2019, and then in 2020 COVID hit, and
Mm-hmm.
I got a lot of time on my hand basically. So I already liked those things, and when I looked up tutorials, and when I was in my struggling phase, I couldn't get I got a lot of tutorials which didn't work, and after like a few like years or months, you would say, I got to know, okay, this thing, when I read this, I understand that this won't work because of this. But that realization or that understanding took like almost a year or two after reading thousands of tutorials that don't work.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought if I could just have a place where I could just like create videos and start things which actually work, because a lot of tutorials that you find that those don't work. People just go through it, and once they find that, oh, this doesn't work, they start losing interest into like cybersecurity and hacking. They feel that these are just myths or these don't work. I don't know what works and what not. So if unless you are very motivated, you won't be like able to go through it after 3 months, because a lot of these things you try that actually doesn't work in the real environment. So I
Right.
wanted something where I could have something that works originally, and that is the way I started learning. And so it was not a very, what do you say, entertainment kind of thing like hacking WhatsApp or hacking this and that, because those things look good on videos, but they don't actually work. So
Right.
I started the path that would work. So yeah, that's how it started. Yeah, code was the reason I got time so I could create videos.
One big advantage of COVID, I guess. And I agree with you. Like
Yeah,
some of the tutorials either they don't work or they are outdated sometimes, right? So you
yeah,
don't see a lot of value from them. Makes sense.
yeah,
Uh,
totally.
so you have been an ethical hacker for a while, right? Using your experience, can you tell us like how should an organization respond to a communication from an ethical hacker whenever they find whenever they report a finding? Like this is on the other side of the hacking, right? Like when somebody reports a finding, how should an organization react or respond to it?
Yep, yep. I mean, I've been on both the sides. So I realize as a hacker what I would expect from the organization, and as an organization what they expect from the hackers. So as a hacker, what I feel is that the work that I did should have some recognition. They should maybe at least acknowledge it and have some response time, because it's just the hacker would send an email. They won't come straight talking to you, because it happens that they tend to live in anonymity because they don't know how the company would respond.
Right.
Maybe the company would start taking legal action or something. So they usually, the communication that happens is they send an anonymous email with some some saying that responsible vulnerability disclosure or something like that, that okay, we are doing this and there is some bug. They don't reveal the bug in the very first communication.
Right.
So I've seen a lot of organizations, they just discard that mail and they don't take it up seriously, which I don't think is the right way. At least you should start communication. You should start gaining trust of the person, that you as a responsible organization, you as a company who is willing to take your customers' security seriously, you are trying to do something on that front. Because if the hacker and the person who is trying to get this solved, if they feel that you're not like you're not basically interested in securing your own customers, you don't know where that would go.
Right.
If they are like, if they are into the gray area, you know where it could go. So I would say you should start a polite regular update. The very first thing is you should acknowledge that email,
Mm-hmm.
and you should ask for more information. You should try to build a trust relationship, because this whole thing is starts with anonymity and might end with that person working for you, maybe as a contract, as anonymously, or whatever way you. So the way you proceed with the communication is very important, in the sense very time sensitive also, and moreover in general sensitive as to how you respond to their comments, how you respond to their emails and all. Because I've seen places like while I was working in my previous organizations, there were people who were not very fluent with
Mm-hmm.
English. There were people who were German hackers or Russians, and they might not understand what you're trying to explain. So it's better to over communicate in that key. This is what we are trying to do. Can you please give a POC? Or well, because they might have some broken English, or the way you are trying to communicate, they might not
Right.
understand. So it's better that you over communicate and try to build a trust relationship. First response should be very quick. I mean, like let's say you got it today. If not, have an automated email or something that acknowledges it, and then make a written, like a actual human person who can write it and send the communication in a day or two. That would be very good.
Okay.
You should like, if you see that they are like okay, so now you have done a few communications, now you understand that okay, this is a real bug and some genuine effort, it's not a scanner that has been run. So you can start like creating bond and start talking to them more and getting how they try to exploit the whole thing. Because once you understand the exploit chain, you might figure out similar details in your other parts of the
Right.
application. So that is what. And towards the end, you should always have some appreciation. If you're not able to, let's say, reward in money or something, you can always reward in kind, maybe swags. Or if even that's not possible, you can have at least a bug bounty appreciation page and you can post it through your social media handles. Because everyone I've seen, they like appreciation. Anyone who does the good work, they would like to have appreciated. So that is a very core thing. That's a very basic thing that a company could do.
Makes sense.
So I mean, yeah, that's something I've seen. Yeah,
Makes a lot of sense, right? At minimum, you should not ignore when you receive any notifications, right? Any findings from any hackers, and
yeah,
try to over communicate wherever necessary. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
So, on like in similar lines, right? We hear about like data breaches, ransomware attacks a lot nowadays. So, for a first time security leader, how should they prepare? Like, how should they plan or budget or even get the executive buy-in, right? So that any they're ready for any potential data breaches or ransomware attacks.
yeah. Okay. So, I've been lucky to work with some of the very good leaders, and I've seen them like the way they talk, the way they respond.
Mm-hmm.
That's very good. And you mentioned that first time security leader. So it's usually the people who become security leader. They are usually very
Right.
techie person, and it's for them to convince someone. It feels a very hard thing. That how would I convince someone to give me a, but like asking money for something is a bit hard thing for them
Right.
usually. But I would say the way I've seen these people work, the leaders that they have establish a whole team, they had this single motto: data doesn't lie. So they used to have data for everything, like how many kinds of attacks are happening, what is the impact for it. Like, in, let's say if we are talking about ransomware attacks, in the past 5 years, how many ransomware attacks hit which region geographically, which kind of, let's say, healthcare industry or maybe automotive industry, what kind of industry, and what was the impact. So based on that, you can, like, because data doesn't lie and everyone agrees that what data is there, data points are there, those are genuine, it
Hmm.
cannot be fabricated. So people tend to get convinced by those data. You may not have very good speaking skills to convince someone, but if you have the right data and you're able to convince, because this is a genuine problem, ransomware
Right.
is a genuine problem that would impact your company, and that would definitely shift you back for a week or something, because you would have to spend some time getting those things up and again, and your customers won't be waiting for you to get recovered from ransomware. They would still have work to do, and they would be
Right.
dependent on you. So once you like instill the importance of it, and you tell them that, see, this is what happened, and if we have a ransomware, or if we have a backup plan, if we have a security team which is monitoring this and this, and this is how much we would be spending on these people and these tools, these automation, let's say these cloud security automation and stuff, and this would help us save this much amount of money, and in the long run we would have this amount of ROI. So if you have data, if you have metrics and all those kinds of things, you can easily talk to the leadership or management or anyone, even, let's say, way senior than you, because they would also agree that, okay, we can't take a risk of getting hacked in some way just because we couldn't shell out a few million rupees or a few $1,000 or
Right.
something like that. So I feel metrics, having data, like that's the gold solution for it. I mean, you can easily convince anyone with those things, and these are real things that are happening. For example, if you say, uh, um, like, let's say if you take the
Hmm.
ransomware attack example, and you have the metrics for those things, and you plan to, let's say you
Hmm.
already have a security team, now you want to have a
Right.
disaster recovery team, and you are finding it hard to convince people. But disaster recovery is important when you want to have come out of situations like these, like what we were talking about, ransomware and all. So that way you can have these metrics and data points, and then like convince people that, okay, this is how you go forward. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
this is how
No,
it goes.
that's spot on, right? Like you have to be data driven in these areas because you're asking your team to sort of create new programs or have financial budgets in place, right? So yeah, absolutely, makes sense. So one of the things that security leaders do is they work with many teams in an organization, right? Infosec, security, red team, purple team, blue team, like many of them are there. So let's say for a company who is around, like, which is around 50 people, growing steadily, and they're about to raise their Series B, and they're working in fintech or healthcare, any space where you handle a lot of PII data, right? So how do you set up your security org in that case? What according to you comes first? How do you hire, or who do you hire? Like there are some of these questions, right, that comes to mind for a first time security leader.
Okay. Okay. Yep. So the very first thing you use, you don't need SOC team from day one. So a lot of people, they just go and they have a SOC team and then get started. So you mentioned that it's a small team, 50 people, raising Series B, handling PI. So there are a lot of things. I would try to tackle them one by one. So uh, 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 like, security will always be a small team, even if you, let's say, have a company of 1,000, 10,000 people. Security will be like 20, 100 people. That's the max. Maybe development team is like 1,000 people, security would be max 100 or 20, 30 people. So this team would always be small, and that is how it should be. I mean, you can't have one security engineer for every software developer. That's not, like, you're not policing around,
Right.
so that can't be possible. So that begs the question, then how do we basically have everything, and how do we have eyes on everything? So automation is the key. There's no other solution. You can't manually manage everything. You need to have automation some way or other. Either you build your own automation, you get some tools to automate things, but you need to have that. And it's better if you have your own engineers who can basically write some code
Mm-hmm.
or at least tweak some things, because you can't have automation for very small things. You would have to make them in house. So those things need to be there. So, and the other thing that you need to have is, you need to have alerting. You need to have like data and dashboards on critical assets, like what is the health of those. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
let's say you have S3 buckets. So you need to have alerting
Right.
whenever those, I'm just giving an example. So let's say you have S3 bucket. So whenever any of those get public automatically, you need to have alerting. Maybe you need to have auto remediation. So these are some of the very first things that whenever I go to a company and if I see that it's not there, I suggest them that we need to build it. I have been building those myself, so I already have written code. So we just push it
Okay.
and then that's already set up there. So that is one thing that I feel that alerting needs to be there on all these critical assets. So the very first thing is
Mm-hmm.
identifying critical assets, keeping a mark, like alerting on those. All this would require automation. So you need to have a team
Mm-hmm.
that is a bit hands-on, not just consultants, but they are able to write something. They are able to write code, because even if you're evaluating a tool, you need to at least know what your team is not capable of, and what that the third party tool that you're buying is basically
Right.
augmenting or supplementing them. Let's say if they are able to build simple automations already, then
Mm-hmm.
they don't need to buy a tool that does that. If they're not able to do that, then you need to buy a tool that has simple automations, and then you build onto that, on top of that. So all this automation, alerting, data. I mean, we used to have, like, just
Mm-hmm.
giving an example, we used to have ELK stack, where we used to push all these metrics into it, and we used to have graphs as to how many assets, like public assets, where are those located, like how many of these, if any of these, let's say, the common ask is usually IAM permissions, whether you're on GCP cloud or you are on AWS. It's IAM permission is one of the things that people are. So we used to have graph where we could see that whether the how
Right.
many over permissive roles are there, and then there used to be a grace period of 90 days and auto remediating all this. So
Mm-hmm.
these was written by our own team. We didn't have a vendor for doing all these, because everyone was bit fluent in Python or Golang or something or the other, and they used to write their
Right.
own. They used to love creating things. That's why. So I believe you need to have I mean, you don't need to have like 10, 20 people, because it's already 50 team
Mm-hmm.
people raising Series B, and it's not a big thing. But it, the other main part you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned was that they are handling a lot of PIA. So as I mentioned, you need to figure out the critical assets. Let's say you have S3 buckets where these PIA data, let's say medical records, are stored. You have, let's say, Redis cache where these are stored, or you have MongoDB which is stored. So you need to identify these assets, and the all this requires, what people usually do is they tell their infra team people to identify these, tag these, and start it. But infra people are
Right.
already overworked with a lot of things. I've seen in every company, especially small
Mm-hmm.
companies, they already overworked with a lot of things, and they wouldn't put a total bandwidth on this one. Initially, if you have a dedicated person, typically a person, if you have someone in the infra team who can mentor them, then even you can have a junior person as well, maybe a fresher or just passed out, or maybe a year or 2 years. If you don't have, I would say, have a person who is hands-on on these things, who has created, who has done
Mm-hmm.
threat modeling on people, on organizations. He has 3 or 4 years of experience, because that 3 or 4 years experience usually means that they have
Right.
taken some interviews for other people for junior roles. They have done some threat modeling. They know how things work in an organization, how to talk to senior leaders, how to get in the buy-in, and all those things. So have a person who is dedicated to this, because you would definitely need it. And you being a person who is handling PI, it's very critical to have someone dedicatedly working on this. He, if he has
Mm-hmm.
knowledge of building automation himself, that would be really good, because I started working, the people and the team who was working with, everyone used to have some hands-on on Python or Golang or something or the other, and they were that proved out to be very useful, because we could quickly wrap up something and have some
Right.
script running while we were still evaluating other tools and
Right.
all. So the immediate task was fulfilled. And once you show that confidence, the senior management also
Right.
tries to, okay, this team is doing good, so we can help them out. So having a dedicated person initially with a hands-on experience That would be
Right.
super awesome to
Yeah, I
get
guess
started with this.
especially when you are like, I like some of your points, right? That if you are dealing with PII data, make sure you have visibility into your critical assets, and have some when you hire somebody who is hands on and has some experience, right? Because you are getting into Series B, and you have to be serious about security. So hiring somebody who has hands on experience adds a lot of value. So uh, I want to sort of shift from hiring to getting hired. So this question came from a student who is getting started in their who are getting started in their career, right? So nowadays there is increased awareness around security even at colleges. So if a student is interested in pursuing their career in security, it can be like an ethical hacker or security professional. How should they go about it?
So, that was quite a natural transition because we were talking about hiring and hired, and all. So that makes sense. And this question is something that I've came a lot of times, even on my channel, like Hacking Simplified, where I talked about this in a few live streams where people came with similar questions. And what I've already always suggested them, a lot of people I've seen, they want to get started in cybersecurity because of seeing these bug bounty screenshots and money and all. But while I started, I wasn't on Twitter initially, so I never got to see all these. I didn't even know that there's a thing called bug bounty. I just know that okay, Facebook and Google pay for the bugs that you find. So I
Right.
used to spend some time on that, and I got a few duplicates, but that was all. I was never into because I got into that, luckily or unluckily, whatever you say. But that was I was always curious about security, and that is what I have been telling people. I started with CTFs, and CTFs basically drill you down into a particular very specific domain, but they give you a very depth knowledge of that particular domain, and that builds a kind of what do you say, uh, setting capacity, I would say, or like rather perseverance, because in CTS you slog for 2 days just to figure out one solution of one problem. I remember
Wow.
while I was playing for Google CTF, I spent like 14 or 16 hours on just one problem, and once it got solved, I was very excited because in the world there were only 41 or 42 teams that solved overall, and we solved
Hmm.
it at 20 or 21st. We were there. So that
Oh,
gives
that's
you a strong
impressive.
confidence. Yeah. So that gives you strong confidence that, okay, if I can do this, I can do other things as well. Like the other things are not very difficult. So this requires a lot of reading. So if you are a person, like say you are a college student or you just passed out, you have started with the software development or whatever region you are, you need to
Hmm.
have some idea of, you can start reading with the news. I usually do like the hackernews.com and the other places, but the first thing I would say is the hackernews.com. If you don't have any idea, just go and read a few articles. Whatever team terms you don't understand, just Google them, read about
Hmm.
it, go into the rabbit hole. You would get to know. So first thing is you need to understand this jargon of terms, let's say ransomware, CVEs, zero day, all these kinds of things. So once you go down the
Right.
rabbit hole, a lot of these terms would be known to you. You once you read the second article, you would already know a few terms, and you would have to Google this. So then that gets a repeat cycle, and once you are aware of these things, like let's say the terms, the 1,000 terms that I use in security, then if you go
Hmm.
to Twitter, if you read some tweets and stuff, you would understand, okay, I read this there, this means this. So you would be able to make connections quickly. Then you would be able to consume more content fastly. Initially it would be very slow. You might be able to just read one or two articles in the day and maybe grasp even half of that. But
Hmm.
once you start with that, you get aware of these terms, like the way
Hmm.
you start learning any language. Let's say you start learning English. So first you learn the alphabet, then you
Right.
make some words, A for apple, B for these kinds of things, and then you get the common words. Then you make sentences and lock. So
Right.
that's what we are trying to build. We are trying to build a security vocabulary first. Once you are aware of these terms, these things that people talk, and you're able to make comprehend what they are talking about, then you can start reading articles. Maybe there's this website called Portsugar, the team
Hmm.
that is behind Bursuit. They have this web academy where you can read the articles, go through the tutorial, and then also practice them on their own site. So that is a protected environment. You can easily practice, and if you don't understand, you can also see the solutions and try to go through that, and then again try to solve this. If you're not able to solve it in the first go, again try to solve this. They have topics on everything: SQL, CXSS, blind SQL, CSRF, out of bound attacks. They have everything. Whatever you feel
Oh.
on web application, they have everything. If you want to go into reverse engineering and stuff, you have live overflow videos. There's exploit exercises. There are a lot of challenges on hack this site and this thing called hack the box. So all
Hmm.
these things. There are YouTube channels, like I also create videos, but they are good YouTube channels for live overflow. There's Ipsec, and like these two I've been following quite persistently, and they make quite quality content. There are a lot of people in the like cybersecurity domain itself.
Hmm.
Like I remember um, there's this guy from Google, DreadSec, I think. Like their team name is DreadSec. He's a very senior person. I talked to him very back while we were doing Google CTO, but it was good. A lot of community content is coming up. Like Farava is doing this, and uh, Ben is doing this. There's this. Uh, what was the guy name? Stoke is making a lot of weekly contents where you can check some of the tools and things that he talk about.
Okay.
You can get a basic updated info of the whole thing that's coming up.
Okay.
But CTFs and Pico CTF is something where suggest people to start, because it's a CTF for high school student in the US, and they even that is a bit difficult for people who are practicing here. So I would say start with that.
Hmm.
That's a very good one, and you would learn a lot of these things. Then there's this thing called war games, where the overthewire.com, overthewire.org is the website where
Okay.
you can play some war games. These
Hmm.
are you can basically you would get used to Linux environment and how to do shell scripting and terminal things, because these are something that you would have to do. Like you being an hacker, you can't be using mouse and all. So you need to have some terminal
Right.
and all those CLI things.
Right.
Yeah, that's how I would suggest someone to start. There's a lot of things, but I think I kind of summarized it in a way.
Yeah, I think you covered many areas, right? But the gist that I can think of is start small, but start reading, learning the
Yeah,
vocabulary, and mm, start like get your feet wet. You cannot just continue to read. You should try things out, and that's how you will learn.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for answering these questions. Right, I personally learned about the hacking world, and also how do you sort of work to uh, like if there are any report like findings reported, how do you work with the hackers as well, right, on those. So thank you so much for that. Here are like the top three things that I learned today. The first one is, when a hacker reports a finding, we sometimes ignore it. It's not wise to do that. Instead, we should acknowledge and work with the hackers to improve the security posture. Second, in order to prepare an organization for any potential data breaches or ransomware attacks, always use a data driven approach and define clear objectives so that you can get buy in from your executives, the other teams. The third one is, when starting your career in security, always start small and get your hands dirty in various areas of security. This will help you find the right path for your career. Um, so now I want to sort of shift gears and move to the rapid fire section. So the first
Yeah.
question is, assuming you are hiring, in one sentence, what stands out in a candidate's resume for you?
Their hands-on experience, like if they have any CTF or bug bounty, anything. If they have something that they did themselves, which is not in their academic curriculum and all,
Hmm.
that stands out pretty much.
Makes sense. What is the biggest lie you have heard in cybersecurity?
Being on a public Wi-Fi can get you hacked. I mean, I've been on public Wi-Fi all the time. That I mean, there's a basic security hygiene. I don't think that happens.
Okay,
No.
good to know. Uh, what advice would you give your 25-year-old self and starting in security, and why?
I would say try to do things manually rather going for tools and automation before those abstractions come
Hmm.
in. Like I remember when I was learning SQL injection, So there was a workshop that happened in our college, and that guy taught that manually. That was a very big thing to me, and I didn't know much about it. Was, I think, the first semester or something, and then I got to read this. There's a article on Exploit DB where you can basically submit papers
Mm-hmm.
and all. So there's this SQL article. There's a big article, and that explains step by step. And that article also works on a few websites. So while that guy showed us working on live website, that was like pretty much very like dope to me. Okay, that this could happen, this can happen in real life. That doesn't work on a lot of websites, but at least I got to know. And then when I started using a skill map, I was pretty much confident what options to use, what things to use, what are these options, what is concatenating, what are these things and all. Otherwise it would be just a black magic or like a black box and I'm just using
Right,
it.
right.
So I feel that you should start small, you should start slow, manually build things and manually try things, gain an inside knowledge as to how things work, and then you can use automation to basically do it
Yeah,
fast.
yeah. That
Yep.
makes a lot of sense, right? Because automations or tools are designed to abstract some of these things, and you lose the opportunity to learn. So yeah, makes a lot of sense. Next is a one-liner quote that keeps you going.
So I have this wallpaper for like 6 7 years now on my personal laptop. So it is a quote from Dr. APJ
Hmm.
Abdul Kalam. He said to shine like a sun first, burn like a sun, and that is something that has kept me motivating.
Yeah, that is very accurate. Um, so the next and the last question is, you have already shared many learning like blogs or videos, right? What are top five like blogs or videos which you follow to stay up to date on current events or new threats that are like popping up every day in security world?
So my currently go-to place is Twitter and RSS feeds.
Okay.
So I have a Feedly free account where I have a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
RSS feeds, like Bleeping Computers, the hackernews.com. So all these RSS feeds. So I basically check out, and then there's the CV database, and also I usually check out those, and like that's all. Twitter is where I get it very fast, and RSS feed is something I check every like morning and evening and like
Wow,
that.
that's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. So, thank you, Aseem. Uh, it was a very good learning experience for me, and I hope that our viewers will also, when they watch, they will learn something as well. Looking forward to learn more from you in the future as well. So, for our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Hope you have learned something new. If you have any questions around security, share those at scale20.com. We'll get those questions answered by an expert in the security space. See you in the next video. Thank you. Thank you, Aseem.
Thank you for inviting.
Absolutely.